What is up YouTube? I am Eric and you are watching Retro Video Game Pickups. In this video we are talking about arcade games that I love to play as a kid. So if you like games, consoles, or product reviews, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell notification. With that being said, let's hop into it. Okay, so I was going through the game collection and I wanted to talk about some arcade games that I played as a kid that I loved. And honestly, these 5 that I'm talking about really jumped out to me. Now, I'm going to be showing off all the kind of home console editions of those games, but I remember vividly about going and playing them in arcades. Now, I've got a few stories with a few of these, and honestly, I am a big fan of all of these games. Now, all of the games that I have here, the ports that I'm talking about may not be the absolute best. Those are obviously going to be the arcade cabinet versions, but we're going to talk about some of those that I have in my collection that I love from whenever I was a kid. So let's talk about the first game. Okay, so I think we had to start somewhere, and I was kind of going through these games and I was like, okay, I don't want to start with this one. Well, I don't want to start with that. And then I was like, okay, I'll start with this one because this is probably one that I love the most, but I also remember vividly the most, and I even have an arcade machine in the corner for this game. Now, it's not specifically this game, but it's a kind of a sequel to that, I guess is what you call it, but that is Pac-Man. Now, I know this is the Atari 2600 version, and this is not the good version. This is probably the worst version of Pac-Man that you can find. But I found the box and I was like, hey, it looks good, so I figured let's show this one off. Now, I have a Miss Pac-Man machine right over there that I have never shown, that I keep off in kind of the corner. No one ever sees it, and so I love that machine. It's so cool. I love the graphics on it. But I remember vividly playing these games. Pac-Man is one of those games that anyone can jump into it and play and have so much fun. And that's why I think I wanted to talk about Pac-Man first. This is one of those games that doesn't matter how good you are at video games, doesn't matter if you've just played video games for the very first time at this arcade, or you've been playing at hundreds of arcades and this is just another game that you've played that you love. This is one of those games that you can listen to from a distance and know what it is. You can hear that sound. You can hear the chomping of Pac-Man or Mrs. Pac-Man. You can hear the ghosts going around whenever they turn into ghosts that you can eat. You can hear them going back to kind of the middle screen and all that stuff. And so when I think of arcade games, I think the top one probably has to be Pac-Man. Now, there are a ton of other great games in this list, but I think Pac-Man is like the way to kind of kick down the door. It's to welcome people in. If you've never played an arcade game, I think Pac-Man is a great way to get people hooked on that, and then once they find that game, they'll find another, and then they'll kind of get in and find all these kind of more obscure, kind of either harder to play games or harder to access games and stuff like that. So that is why Pac-Man is number 1, or at least the first game on this list. Okay, so this next game is the shirt I'm wearing, obviously, and that is Joust. Now, this is the NES version. I thought I had an Atari 2600 version of it, but I couldn't find it, and so here we are talking about the NES version. But this was a game that I didn't know about as a kid. Honestly, I probably found out about this between like 12 and 14, and that's only because my dad played it. Now, I had seen this weird guy riding an ostrich. Yes, they ride an ostrich. It's totally weird, but honestly, it's a really super fun game, and my dad kind of showed me what it was, and we ended up playing it and having so much fun with it. We later on picked it up on the PS3, like one of those arcade games that you could buy on the digital shop, and then we played it there. And like, there's just so many iterations of this game that I love to play. Even like this past weekend, I was at a friend's house and they have a multi-cade. I even played Joust on that and showed one of my other friends that he'd never seen it. But when you're riding around on an ostrich, smashing or kind of jumping on other ostriches and trying to grab the eggs, like literally, this is one of those games that's so much fun. And when I think of arcade games, for me, Joust is one of those games that comes right to mind. And honestly, all of these games come to my mind when it comes to playing arcade games. Honestly, Pac-Man, Joust, and then the rest of these games that we're going to be talking about just are those games that you've got to play if you have either been around an arcade, or even if you're playing like those random arcade collections on whatever system you're playing it on. Those are games that you should definitely check out. Okay, so the last game we talked about was Joust, and I talked about how I played that with my dad. Now this other one, this next one right now that we're talking about, is one that actually I've played with my mom. Now my mom loves this game. My mom doesn't play video games very often, and when she does, and she's obsessed with something like this game, you know it's probably going to be a super fun game. And that is Galaga. Now, I don't have another copy of Galaga for whatever reason, but Galaga is such a very fun game. Now, I have played Galaga hundreds of times just because of my mother. If we go to an arcade and she happens to be around, that's the game she gravitates to. And so usually me, my dad, we kind of play around trying to beat the score, and she knows the kind of the rhythm of the aliens, I think is what they are. I don't really 100% know. I'm guessing they're aliens, and she knows kind of the rhythm and the algorithm of which they come, and so she's a lot better. But they have that new Galaga arcade machine, the one that's like super tall and the characters are really big, and it's a cool game as well. That is one that I have honestly played here recently. There's an arcade machine in a pizza place that I live by, and I have like the top three, one of the top three at over like 1 million points. I'm not bragging, but I think that's really cool for me, like still to be able to find arcades. Now it isn't a pizza place, but it's still an arcade that I can play. I know it's one of those new games, and some people are probably gonna be like, no, that's not real arcade, but I mean, it's fun, and you put quarters in it and you play it. So Galaga is my number 3 on this list. And the next 2 are going to be games that I think are solid, and I want to talk about them more, so let's do that now. Okay, so growing up in this town that I live in, there were a few pizza places, not many honestly, and only one that I could think of had an arcade. And when I say had an arcade, I mean it was probably the size of this room, not very big, maybe 12 by 12 with like 5 to 10 arcade games. Depending on what they brought in and all that stuff. But this is one that I loved playing when it was in the arcade, and then when it came to the Nintendo 64, I picked it up and played it even more, and that is Cruisin' World. No, wait, that's Cruisin' Exotica. Now I have Cruisin' World and I've played those arcade games, but Cruisin' Exotica is just, it took it up a notch. Now this was that weird and wacky, taking those cars to the exotic level, taking the maps to that exotic level, whether it's on Mars, whether it's at Vegas, whether it's another planet, whether it's going through the safari. Cruisin' Exotica is one of those games that I love to play. Now, when I go back now and go back and visit it, I see the graphic issues and it's not as great as I remember, to be honest, but it is still a fun racing game. And so if I think of a racing game where I sit down and kind of think about racing games when it comes to the arcade, Cruisin' Exotica is one that has to be on my list, because I remember the pizza place that had the arcade that I was able to go to and play these arcade games. So I had to add that to this list. Now there are a few other great ones. There's like Daytona 500 ones, there's some Sega racing ones, there's a ton of cool racing ones, but when I think of it, I think of Cruisin' Exotica, purely because of this nostalgia factor, and it was at that pizza place that I used to visit when I was younger. Okay, so this last one is probably, I would have to say, it's gotta be my favorite arcade machine. Now, I don't know if that's just because I loved playing it as a kid, or if because I still love it to play it now, but this is one of those games that every time I play it, I just have so much fun, and that is Mortal Kombat. Now, Mortal Kombat was a cool system setup, whatever you want to call it. When this came out, you got those cool graphic designs on the side. You got the panel overlay was really cool. There's just so much about this game that was awesome. Now, when it came out, there was a bunch of hoopla about the blood and gore in the video games, and this is even rated MA13, which I don't really exactly know what that means. Maybe you have to be 13 to play it. Usually mature is older than that, but whatever. But the arcade game was one of the best that I played, and I loved it so much. I actually had a Mortal Kombat machine, arcade machine here, but the whenever I bought it, the cabinet was really beat up, and it was basically in disrepair, so I have yet to fix that and get a new cab for it, but I did have to take it apart and take everything from the inside out. Everything still works and all that, but I don't have a cabinet for that right now, so it sits packed up. But Mortal Kombat is my favorite arcade game, and that's why I have it. Honestly, I love to play it, and every once in a while I'll pick up the Genesis version or another version and play it, and it's still so much fun. Whether it's the old ones, the brand new ones, Mortal Kombat for me is such an awesome game, and that's why I think it is an iconic arcade game. So that is my 5 kind of top arcade games from whenever I was a kid. All of these games are awesome to play still, and honestly, nostalgia whenever I'm playing it is still there, and so that's why I wanted to talk about it with you guys. I want to know what you think. What are some of your favorite arcade games from whenever you were a kid? Comment that down below and let me know. I want to say thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Make sure you hit that bell notification because it lets you know when I post more videos, which is every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And honestly, one more time, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to stay safe, wash your hands, practice social distancing, stay 6 feet away from each other, all that stuff, stay safe. And if you're out protesting, just be safe as well. I want to say all that, be safe. Be thinking of you and your family and all that. So if you're going to go out and do that stuff, just make sure you're safe. Also, one last time, thank you so much for watching, and make sure you have a good day.